Many of the call signs used before the Second World War, and even just afterwards, would not be recognized by many of today's operators. Many of those countries have changed both their name and their call signs. ZC1AL from Transjordan, now Jordan, or like MP4MAH, Muscat and Oman, now Oman. ZS9P, Bechuanaland, and now Botswana. ZC5JM, British North Borneo. FN8AD, French India. VQ1HJP, Zanzibar, now part of Tanzania. Even this card is not from South Australia, but from the Northern Territory before the VK8 prefix came into being. Or perhaps VK4OS, not from Queensland, but from Papua Territory. Also VK2LE, not from New South Wales, but from the ACT, before the allocation of the VK1 prefix. The QSL is dated March 1930. Nowadays, we associate the K prefix with North American stations, but before the war, the K prefix indicated overseas countries occupied by the United States forces. Amongst these can be mentioned KA1SX, dated 1934, from Clark Airfield in the Philippines. Note the biplanes. K4ESH from Puerto Rico. K5AM, Panama Canal Zone, now returned to Panama. K6PUL from the Hawaiian Islands. K7RT, Alaska, before it became a state of the USA. We can also include a very rare pre-war Wake Island QSL, also carrying the K6 prefix. Today we assume just about every country permits amateur radio, but in the 1920s several stations allowed only the reception of radio signals. This QSL, dated May 1925, was sent from the Netherlands. It was sent illegally. On the bottom of the QSL, the operator has written CUL, call you later, 73. Transmission is forbidden in Holland. As time went on, territories that had been listed under one country became separate countries, particularly after the popularity of DX certificates, such as the ARRL's DXCC. Here are a few of those older QSLs, listed under British Station or under the G for Great Britain prefix. G8MF, Guernsey. 2AOU, Jersey, both now with prefix GC. G6OK, Wales. G5YG, Scotland, GM. 5NJ, Northern Ireland, GI. In the infancy of amateur radio, handwritten call signs gave way to printed ones, but it wasn't until the 1930s that we find pictorials becoming popular. It is true that there were exceptions, like this 1925 QSL, from an operator in Brooklyn, New York, who showed a great deal of imagination. The QSL AC3GB from China, dated 1931, was a little unusual for its time. Fortunately for the radio historian, several operators were starting to show their equipment as well as describing it on their QSLs, like these ones from England. And 2NS from New South Wales. The QSL is dated 1928. This QSL of Marjorie Hutchings, VK3HQ, is dated December 1932 and showed an excellent photo of the operator. It was widely featured in the USA at the time. Marjorie's mother, VK3HM, was the first XYL licensed in Victoria and quite probably in Australia. Incidentally, her son Alan OA3HL was one of the best DXers not just in Australia but in the world. What a family! This QSL, EA2BT from Spain, looks very quaint by today's QSL standards. Note the speaker cabinet, the valve, the variable condenser, and the microphone on the left. During the 1930s, full use was being made by operators of commercial postcards, since during that decade money for printing was hard to come by. There seems to be no limit to the number of QSLs that come into the collection that have an interesting story to tell. One such example is ZL2HO, not from New Zealand, but from Chatham Island. It is dated 16th of November 1932. The island did not become a DXCC country until 1958. This one is particularly interesting in the light of recent events. The card, YI2DS, is from Iraq, dated December 1932. This was a troubled period for Iraq, with frequent ethnic uprisings. This QSL is from a member of the RAF stationed in Basra, the very location to which British forces were sent in 2004, 70 years later. Before the Second World War, US military personnel were granted an NY prefix. The QSL NY2AB was sent in 1935 from the Panama Canal Zone. Later, the allocated prefix became KZ5. G6QB. The operator of this station, Dr. L. H. Thomas of Surrey, England, was the radio amateur who conducted the first medical consultation by radio. His QSL is dated 1931, but the consultation occurred in April 1937 when he transmitted on the amateur 10-meter band heartbeats from the King's College Hospital to Vermont, USA. Early experimenters were able to check the frequency of their transmissions with their divisional WIA station. In those days, many operators ground their own crystals. The QSL is dated 12th of December 1933. This W8CBF QSL, dated 5th of March 1932, records an event that made headlines around the world. The sender has written near the bottom of the card, "I sent your expressions of hope of baby to Lindbergh." The famous aviator's son had been kidnapped at this time. Messages of hope flowed in from around the world. Unfortunately, the child was murdered. The kidnapper was convicted and executed. This is an interesting old QSL from Ocean Island, now called Banaba. It is dated October 1933. And judging by the few buildings in the photograph, there was very little development at that time. It is a homemade QSL, since, as the writer points out on the reverse side of the card, there was no printer on the island.